For 5 long years, my neighbor was using my backyard as his own personal secret garbage dump. I didn't scream. I didn't call the cops. I just quietly, patiently collected every single piece of trash he threw over my fence. And when I finally caught him red-handed, I returned half a decade's worth of his garbage in a single glorious night.
I've always been the kind of guy who likes to keep to himself. I work night shifts, which means my schedule is completely flipped compared to the rest of the world. When my neighbors are having their morning coffee, I'm usually just getting into bed. Because of this, I rarely see the people living around me. In the 5 years I'd lived in my house, I could probably count on one hand the number of times I'd actually made eye contact with the guy living next door. But I take a lot of pride in my home, and especially in my backyard. It's fully fenced in, private, and it's my little sanctuary. I like to keep the grass neatly trimmed and looking good. But about a few months after I moved in, I started noticing something weird. Occasionally, while I was out pushing my lawnmower, I'd spot something white and chunky hidden in the tall grass. I'd stop the mower, walk over, and find a bone. Not a human bone, don't worry. It was a dog bone. The thick, heavy kind you buy at the butcher or the pet store for a large dog to gnaw on for hours. At first, I was just confused. I don't own a dog. So how did a massive, chewed-up piece of animal bone end up right in the middle of my perfectly manicured lawn?
Now, a dog bone in the grass might sound like a minor thing, but if you've ever hit a solid, calcified chunk of bone with a lawnmower blade spinning at 3,000 RPMs, you know it's practically a landmine. It can shatter your mower blades, or worse, shoot out like a piece of flying shrapnel and break a window. So it was a safety hazard. Every other month, I'd find another one, sometimes 2. I had my suspicions, of course. Of all the houses bordering my property, only one neighbor had dogs big enough to chew on these massive femur bones. It was the older guy next door, the one I never spoke to. But I never had hard proof. Maybe a raccoon dragged it over, maybe a stray. Because I didn't know for sure, I didn't want to start a neighbor war over an assumption. It was a mild inconvenience, but I'm a patient guy. I just started picking them up. Instead of throwing them in the trash, for some reason I started tossing them into a little plastic storage container I kept in the corner of my garage. Over the years, that bin slowly filled up. 10 bones, 30 bones, 50 bones. I accrued quite a bizarre, morbid collection. Then came the catalyst. One day, I got off my night shift early. I came home in the early afternoon, which was incredibly rare for me. As I was pulling my car into the driveway, I heard the faint sound of a lawnmower running next door. I killed my engine, stepped out of the car, and looked toward the shared fence. And right at that exact moment, I saw it. A large, heavy dog bone arced gracefully over the wooden fence and landed with a dull thud in my grass. I stood there frozen. My blood started to boil. This older guy was out there cutting his grass, and instead of picking up his dog's bones and throwing them in the trash like a civilized human being, he was lobbing them into my yard, just so he wouldn't have to run them over, because he was a lazy piece of work.
I stared at the fence for a long time. I pride myself on being a reasonable, level-headed person, but let me tell you a secret about myself. Under the right circumstances, I can be a petty, vindictive little mastermind. My first instinct was to march over there, bang on his door, and call him out on it. But I played that scenario out in my head. If I confronted him, he'd probably just play dumb. Bones? What bones? Must be raccoons, buddy. Or worse, he might get defensive and start throwing even more trash over the fence just to be a prick, knowing he got under my skin. No, words were not going to fix a 5-year habit of disrespect. I needed to send a message so clear, so undeniable that he would never even think about looking at my fence again. I walked into my garage and looked at the corner. There it was, the plastic storage container. It was heavy, covered in a thin layer of dust. I popped the lid off. inside was half a decade of his laziness. Easily over 100 chunks of dried, sun-bleached dog bones. I smiled. He didn't want to dispose of his trash? Fine, but he couldn't use my yard as a landfill. I was just going to politely return his property. All of it. And if he wanted to have a conversation about it afterward, we could absolutely do that.
I waited. I had to be patient. I went inside, made myself some dinner, and watched the sun slowly dip below the horizon. I waited until the neighborhood was dead quiet, swallowed by the darkness of a suburban night. Around 9 p.m., I slipped out my back door. I lugged the heavy plastic container out into the middle of the yard. It weighed easily 20 or 30 pounds. I set it down in the grass, right next to the shared fence. I reached in and grabbed a handful of bones. They clacked together in my hands. I stepped back, wound up my arm, and threw them over the fence. Thud, clack, rustle. I didn't just dump the bin over. Oh no, that would be too easy for him to clean up. I wanted him to experience the exact same inconvenience he had caused me, multiplied by 100. So I took my time. For the next half hour, I stood in the dark, conducting a tactical bone strike on his property. I threw some close to his patio. I chucked some deep into the far corners of his yard. I lobbed a few directly into his prized flower bushes. I made sure there wasn't a single square foot of his lawn that didn't have a bone resting on it. With every throw, a little bit of the annoyance I'd built up over 5 years left my body. There was something deeply, profoundly satisfying about it. It was cathartic. Clack. Take that for 2019. Thud. Take that for 2021. By the time I reached the bottom of the bin, my arm was actually tired. I tossed the last tiny chunk over the wood, picked up my empty container, and walked back inside. I slept like a baby that night.
The next morning, I didn't hear his lawnmower. I can only imagine the sheer panic and confusion he must have felt walking out onto his back porch, coffee in hand, only to find his entire yard looking like a dinosaur graveyard. He had to spend hours picking up every single piece of trash he had thrown into my yard over the last half-decade. But the best part happened about a week later. Because of my night shifts, it was rare for us to cross paths. But one afternoon, we happened to be leaving our houses at the exact same time. I was walking to my car, he was walking to his truck. We locked eyes. I would characterize his facial expression as severely disgruntled. His jaw was tight, his eyes were narrowed, and he looked like he wanted to murder me. I couldn't help it. A massive ear-to-ear smile spread across my face. I gave him a polite little nod. He just stared at me. He opened his mouth for a second, and then closed it. He didn't say a single word. He just got in his truck and drove away. Because what could he say? Hey, why did you throw 100 bones in my yard? If he asked that, he would have to acknowledge how I got 100 of his dog's bones in the first place. He'd have to admit what he'd been doing for years. He was trapped by his own guilt. And the result? It's been months since that day. I've mowed my lawn dozens of times, and I haven't seen a single bone since.
And that is how you cure a lazy neighbor with a heavy dose of his own medicine. If you enjoyed this story of petty revenge, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know down in the comments, what would you have done with the bones? Would you have confronted him, or was my midnight delivery the right call? If you want more stories of people getting exactly what they deserve, click on the video on your screen right now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.